Welcome into the Believe in Steelers show. I'm Mark Bergin. Very excited to be joined today by Alex Kozora of Steelers Depot. And before we get to Alex to ask him about his observations from Steelers training camp, let's pay some bills. Today's episode of the Believe in Steelers show is brought to you by betonline.ag. The Olympics are well underway. Preseason football starts this week. Hall of Fame game on Thursday, Bears and Texans. If you want to get in on the action, betonline.ag is the place to do it. You can use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to get started. BetOnline, the game starts here. Welcome into Believe in Steelers. I'm Mark Bergin, and let's bring in today's guest. He is Alex Kozora of Steelers Depot. Alex, I will say this, welcoming you in. Your coverage of the Pittsburgh Steelers is second to none, and I'm very excited to talk about what you've seen, boots on the ground, Latrobe, PA, from Steelers training camp. Welcome in.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate the kind words. And yeah, it's been a fun couple days of camp. Pads aren't on yet. Tuesday's going to be the real day, but it's still been a fun first 4 days.
We're going to be talking about a lot with the quarterback position between now and week one. Russell Wilson has yet to suit up in full. I know the Steelers are off today on Monday when we are recording. They'll get back after it on Tuesday. Do you have any level of concern with the calf strain at all? Because I'm still operating under the assumption, Alex, that Wilson's going to be the week one starter, but you've physically been there. What's kind of been the conversation about all of that? What are your thoughts and sentiments about the quarterback battle?
No concern, and I'm with you. Russell Wilson, barring something unforeseen, it would likely have to be a very serious injury. Is not Russell Wilson will be this week one starter against Atlanta in Atlanta. I understand the headline of the starting quarterback missing the first 4 practices can seem a little scary, but this team, Mark, has been just super cautious, just super careful with Wilson. He is older. And I go back to, remember Joe Burrow last year had a calf strain in training camp, tried to play through it. Bad idea, really hindered him, this offense, the Bengals offense, throughout the first month of the season. Pittsburgh does not want to go down that road again. You watch Wilson at practice. If you didn't know he was hurt, if Tomlin didn't say it, if Wilson didn't say it, you would have thought he was A-okay. He's done more in practice every single day. He did work in some individual periods yesterday, or at least on Sunday, I should say. And so he's looked more mobile. They've added more to his workload each day. He wants to be out there. He should be out there by Tuesday, or at least sometime during this weekend team period. So I have no concern about the status and health of his calf. He's okay.
I'm fine with him having kind of a country club training camp, Alex, because he's going into year 13. It's like, I know what he can do. And I will say this as well. Seattle's line took a lot of flack because they gave up a lot of sacks. Russell Wilson, if he plays the way he's capable of playing, kind of holds the ball a little bit. I don't need him taking hits. And I know that won't happen in training camp, but ultimately, if the Steelers are to achieve success this season, you're going to need Russell Wilson healthy and playing at his highest level on the back half of the season. So, I see all of this, and we're excited with Justin Fields can do as well. I think that's a component to this, but I'm fine with Russell Wilson. If he wants to miss as much practice time as he needs to make sure he's ready come the regular season, I'm fine with that.
Plus, he worked in OTAs. They worked out in San Diego a couple times, a bunch of the receivers. And so this is still an OTA-type feeling before the pads come on and things really ramp up intensity-wise. So don't let the small thing become the big thing. Let the calf strain heal for a couple days. Take your time. Now, I don't know why the quarterbacks are apparently pushing sleds for their conditioning test. That should be crossed off the list for next year. Let's not go down that road. It's like me trying to push a sled. Bad idea all around. But Wilson's okay. He'll be the starter. He'll practice this week.
Alex, don't sell yourself short. That's funny, though. And I'll say this, too, and I know it's early on and we're itching for football, but it's like Justin Fields with a downfield pass to Van Jefferson and a downfield pass to George Pickens. We're talking about 2 throws in training camp practice. So it's like I always say, don't overestimate the preseason. I say this every year. It's like a war reenactment. And if you want last year as an example with the 5 drives and 5 touchdowns with Kenny Pickett, about how that has no bearing on the regular season, last year is a great example of that. It's exciting to see Justin Fields do these things in practice, but it's like those 2 throws have just made the rounds all on social media. And Alex, I feel like people have lost their minds.
Welcome to training camp, baby. That's what this time of year is all about. It's intoxicating. And listen, Fields has thrown a pretty deep ball. I mean, physically, the physical traits and tools and talents have never been in question with Justin Fields. You see the speed when he runs with the football. He had a designed run in 7 shots on Sunday. You're going to probably see that in some sort of short yardage goal line packages throughout the season. This guy, not only does he have a strong arm, the placement and accuracy downfield, I think, is impressive. Those throws you mentioned to Jefferson and Pickens. I'll mention the slot fade he threw to Pat Freiermuth early in camp. There's really good touch and accuracy. But to me, Mark, throughout the first 4 practices, it has been the same Justin Fields as he was in Chicago. A lot of variance, some really impressive plays, but some negative ones as well. His accuracy underneath has to get cleaned up. Thought he really struggled as practice went on Sunday through the first pick in training camp on a bad throw that Scotty Miller, the Donte Jackson, broke off his route and picked it off. Fields followed it up with a near miss on a screen pass to Jaylen Warren that was way over his head. Warren made a nice one-handed catch to secure it. Fields almost threw a second pick on a crossing route to Keelan Barnes. The cornerback nearly jumped, and so you're stacking some negative plays there. It's been a mixed bag. There's been some good with the physical talents, the arm strength, the downfield placement. I think he has also gone through his reads and his progressions pretty well. So there's been some intangible things to give him credit for, but there has been a lot of inconsistency in his game, which of course has been the book on him since entering the NFL his time in Chicago, which shouldn't be a shock. He's not going to be a radically different quarterback a couple of training camp practices in compared to what he was in Chicago. This is a process. I think he'll have a good preseason. I think he'll excite with the physical tools, but it has been inconsistent up and down and nothing telling me that he's really pushing Russell Wilson to be this team's starting quarterback week 1.
When you say the consistency, Alex, and I've read some of your coverage over on Steelers Depot, is it just kind of I forget how Mike Tomlin phrases it, but just like kind of the run-of-the-mill plays of like the plays that should just be muscle memory? Is that what you're talking about in terms of the consistency with Justin Fields' play?
Doing the routine things routinely is the Mike Tomlin phrase. And that's what's still been a little lacking. There was a crosser to Calvin Austin thrown behind. There were some RPOs that were a little bit high for Pat Freiermuth that probably could have had a bit better placement from Fields. And so there's small things, but they can be big things. The NFL's about, it's a game of inches. And so I want to see Fields be a little bit better with his mechanics, his footwork in the pocket. Not all bad. There's been some really fun plays. I want to give him credit for the good things that he's done. But don't let anyone paint a picture that has been amazing and perfect for Fields and that this guy is really challenging Wilson for that starting job. I just don't see it, at least not 4 practices in.
Yeah, and even if that happened in a preseason game, Alex, again, I look back to last year and say, what does this actually mean come regular season? I do want to get to some other position groups, but I have 2 questions for you with the quarterback position, and I'll ask one at a time. We both are in consensus that Russell Wilson would be the starter come week 1. The presenting sponsor of the show, BetOnline, has Russell Wilson as a minus 1,000 favorite as of about a week ago. Curious to see if those lines change at all. But the first part of the question I'll ask is this. Who do you think is the starter come week 18 for the Steelers between Russell Wilson and Justin Fields?
If I had a confident answer, I'd be doing something else other than this right now. I'm sure if I had that kind of crystal ball, but I really think it's going to be Wilson wire to wire, putting injuries aside. And Wilson's been a pretty durable quarterback throughout his career. I mean, Pittsburgh's going to be competitive. They're going to be in the playoff hunt because they're always in the playoff hunt with far worse quarterbacks than Russell Wilson. And so as long as they are, it'd be hard to see the team make a depth chart change midseason if Wilson is playing at least competent football, which I think he's certainly more than capable of. So my expectation, Mark, is that Wilson will be the starter week 1 and throughout the season. Could that change? Of course. No one can predict that Mason Rudolph was going to be the guy that leads Pittsburgh to the playoffs last year. No one would have guessed that. So the season is unpredictable, and there's so much unknown with a brand new quarterback room, new OC, new offense overall. But as things stand today, my thought is Wilson is the guy the whole way through.
You answered my second question, which was kind of a follow-up to that of like, who gets more starts? And I'm with you. I think it's going to be Wilson until the wheels fall off. If the season goes sideways or even south, then I think you turn over your rocks and see what you have with Justin Fields, because you know what Russell Wilson is a quarterback at this point in his career. The hope with Fields, I think, would be see if he can continue to ascend his play. That's my thought process. But how the Steelers handle this season, because both quarterbacks making less than $5 million combined this year aren't under contract beyond the 2024 season, is going to be fascinating to watch.
It is. That's such a huge question. Who is this quarterback next year? And no one knows. We don't know. I don't know. I'm assuming you don't know. The team doesn't know. And that's why you let the season play out and fact find. And hopefully you can identify. To me, there's a debate about, okay, who's your long-term future? Could Wilson, could you get 3-4 years out of him? Can Fields become the guy? Ascend, like you said. What if it's neither? What if neither guy proves themselves? Or Wilson has an okay year, but it's not like you want to commit big money to him, and Fields doesn't play a lot. So if you want to really lock him up long-term, are you going to be in Pittsburgh? Has to get out of quarterback purgatory. They are in this weird middle space where they're never bad enough to pick top 5, get a blue chip quarterback in the draft, but they're yet to find that franchise guy. So that's the tricky part they're in. They have to exit that. Hopefully they can. I can't guarantee they will. But again, I think Wilson will be the guy that will get the opportunity basically wire to wire.
Quarterback purgatory is the perfect way to describe that, Alex. And it's been the criticism of Tomlin, the lack of playoff success recently. You go back to January of 2017, since your last playoff win, and I always point to, well, who's your quarterback been relative to the other stud quarterbacks in the AFC? So we'll talk a lot about Wilson and Fields in 2024 and beyond. I do want to get to some other position groups. I want to leave this a little bit open-ended for you. Is who's been a standout player for the Steelers? And feel free to take this in any direction you'd like in terms of any position group beyond the quarterbacks.
Sure. I have an article up on Steelers Depot on Monday that goes through 5 Steelers standouts. I'll just kind of recap that briefly, mostly defensively so far for me. But tight end Pat Freiermuth, not that it's a huge shock to hear Freiermuth doing well. It's not just about his play, which has been fine, but the targets he's seen. He's had a really good chemistry with Justin Fields, who has peppered him with targets. Freiermuth has 8 targets through the first 4 practices, 7 of which came during the first 2 days. A lot of red zone type work, 7 shots, opportunities for him. And so in an Arthur Smith offense, as the de facto number 2 receiver in this offense until and unless this team were to add somebody big on the outside, Freiermuth could be in for a career season. And if he gets a contract extension before week 1, like I think he will, even more incentive to get that guy the football. Defensively, a bunch of names here. DeMarvin Leal, big year for DeMarvin Leal, make or break training camp for him. 3rd-year guy who has struggled so far. He's flashed. He's been quick. He's been in the backfield, batting down passes at the line of scrimmage. It's been a good start for him, and it's needed to be a good start for him. About Kyron Johnson, backup 3rd-string outside linebacker, tough path to make the 53. But again, he's looked quick, explosive, well-rounded, set the edge against the run in team period. I've been happy with his play. He's going to push Jeremiah Moon for one of those backup outside linebacker spots. Donte Jackson, the guy that came over the corner from the Carolina Panthers in the Donte Johnson deal. He's had a really strong start to camp, been competitive and combative at the catch point with George Pickens, with Calvin Austin, picked off Justin Fields. Porter's looked good. He's the top corner, of course, but Jackson giving me a bit more confidence as this team's number 2 opposite of him. And then the inside linebackers, Payton Wilson, the rookie, and Patrick Queen, the 2 big acquisitions there. Both have been as advertised, quick, explosive, quick to the flat, making plays. Wilson, a hard worker, first guy on the field basically every single practice. And so Pittsburgh's inside linebacker room with those 2 names, with Landon Roberts, hopefully Cole Holcomb comes back at some point. It's a really strong group top to bottom.
Let's go to Freiermuth, and then I've got a couple of other thoughts on some of the players you just mentioned, the contract season. And interesting to hear that you think that the Steelers and Freiermuth will get a deal done before the start of the season. If you're Freiermuth, why not bet on yourself? Would the answer there be injuries and that he struggled to stay on the field?
It would be partly that. And so long as Pittsburgh can offer fair market value where the tight end market has heated up, if he can get 12, 13 million per year, he'd probably take that. You could bet on yourself, and he wouldn't be necessarily wrong to do so. But if you're getting a fair deal that's not below market coming off the off season or the down season that was impacted by injury, then you take that and don't get too greedy about it. And plus, it's just good to have job security. If you know that contract extension is done, you're not worried about, I'm playing into my last year. Where am I going to be playing next year? What if I get hurt, and is that going to ding me? I mean, there's a lot of probably stress and anxiety that I'm sure comes along with being in a contract season. So I think it will get done. I think Pittsburgh has incentive to get it done, to lock up one of their young guys in their prime. And I think he'll be, get that deal before week 1 kicks off.
And I'm fine if the Steelers use him as a number 2 receiver and don't have him block a ton, because there's other depth at the tight end position, to where one of my biggest questions going into the season, it's like, I really like what the Steelers have with George Pickens, but who's the 2 receiver behind him? And it's amazing to me, Alex, the very first game that the Steelers played post Matt Canada, who did they target over the middle against the Bengals? It was Freiermuth. And it's like, where has this been in this offense since he stepped onto the field. And he's a matchup problem because he's faster than linebackers. He can go up and win combat catches in one-on-one. He's a size mismatch for a DB. So to me, creating those schematic advantages with Freiermuth and his demonstrated ability as a receiver, that's something the Steelers absolutely must utilize. And when he's been healthy, I like the production he's had, but they always say the best ability is availability.
I think it's a great point about the tight end depth. And if someone like Darnell Washington can really be your blocking ace, and that's really what he's done in camp primarily so far, is be just focus on as a blocker, even in training camp Sunday, before practice, after practice, really working on his pass sets and as a blocker off of play action. And so if he can do that and assume that role, and if you can be more creative with Freiermuth and split him out in the slot or backside in 3-by-1, which they have done in past years, even under Canada, it's not going to be brand new in Pittsburgh, but can you do that more often? I think you can be creative with Freiermuth. Arthur Smith will certainly be putting multiple tight ends on the field. You've seen a ton of 12 personnel, 13 personnel, and that's going to probably allow more flexibility and formational versatility with somebody like Pat Freiermuth.
Let's go to Leal, and you were mentioning him. To me, this is music to my ears because we mentioned contract seasons. Cam Hayward at the age of 35, entering the final year of his deal. Larry Ogunjobi, a very established veteran, into his 30s as well. So it's like, who picks up the slack of, both as veteran established players in this league, but it's a young man's sport. Is it Leal, is still as a young player, Keanu Benton in year 2. So that excites me because to me, how all of this would unravel would be if you don't have a stout interior. That's where it almost neutralizes what a TJ Watt or an Alex Highsmith can bring to the table from the outside. We're coming off a year where you battled injuries up front. Do you think it's a coincidence that Minkah Fitzpatrick didn't have a takeaway a season ago because of a lot of the injuries that you have up front? Because I don't. So when you say a player like DeMarvin Leal or Keanu Benton, how they need to ascend for this defense to remain very good, maybe to almost elite level play, I think it all starts up front. So you've got Leal on this list, and it's like, all right, I saw him dominate the SEC. I want to see him continue to get better and better at the NFL level.
Same here. And you're right. The core tenet of Pittsburgh's defense for the last really 50 years has been stop the run first. You stop the run, you're going to put teams in third and long, going to allow your pass rush to go to work, be able to get pressure with 4, drop 7. That's ideally, big picture how Pittsburgh wants to play. So Leal still has to prove it. I think as a pass rusher, he was really unrefined. He's a great athlete. He's been that way at A&M. You'll see him run with Jaylen Warren 30 yards downfield. I mean, he's just a really freak athlete, but can you translate that into something more refined and get off blocks and find a go-to pass rush move? Still searching and still need to verify and observe those things, but you've been able to see more consistency just in terms of his play so far in run session, beating blocks, penetrating, one gapping and getting upfield, and just, having good hustle to the football. And it helps that Pittsburgh is playing him as a defined defensive lineman. I will say, in fairness to him, his rookie year, he was a defensive lineman. TJ Watt gets hurt week 1. They try to make Leal an outside linebacker. They drop his weight a little bit. He's even playing some off-ball linebacker. Last year in camp, he was playing a little bit of outside linebacker and defensive line. Let him just be a defensive lineman and let him focus on that and keep his weight sustained and really hone his craft. So hopefully it continues. You're right, Mark. Short term, you need that. Long term, certainly need that with Hayward, Ogunjobi getting older. Again, needs to see more, but if you can get Leal as a quality rotational piece for this year, that would be so huge for the depth of Pittsburgh's defensive line.
Yeah, I want to go to Kyron Johnson as well, because one of the questions I have is, obviously, TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith aren't coming off the field all that often. I think Nick Herbig picks up the slack of a lot of the reps that Marcus Golden got a year ago, and I thought Marcus Golden played well in his time on the field for the Steelers. Who's that fourth guy who can play a special teams role? I think Herbig steps into that backup role where if Highsmith or Watt need a blow, they need a breather on the sideline, you bring him in. With his limited defensive snaps that he had a year ago, he made the most of those opportunities. So he kind of steps up into that backup role. And then who's fourth behind those guys? That's one of the questions I have going into this year for the Steelers.
You're right. Top 3 is locked in. Watt, Highsmith, Herbig. The number 4 is the battle between Jeremiah Moon, claimed off of waivers from Baltimore right around the Super Bowl last year, and Kyron Johnson, who people forget was on Pittsburgh's 53 the back half of last year, primarily played on special teams, but it's not new to them and has played some on Sunday. So Moon, to me, has the edge. He's bigger, he's stronger, he's got special teams value like Johnson. Moon has to become a more refined player as a pass rusher. I think he's really raw overall, but there's talent there. Johnson is much smaller, a slighter build, doesn't typically work great in Pittsburgh overall, but he's made plays. And if he can push Moon and make Moon have to really have a great camp too, then he's got a chance to make this team. At worst, I think Johnson early, but trending towards making the practice squad and hanging around this team. It just, I don't know where it's going to go with him. He may not make the roster. That's certainly plausible, but in a vacuum, first 4 days of practice, the guy that's often in my notes, in team period, run defense, pass rush is Kyron Johnson, and that's worth sharing.
Yeah. Donte Jackson at the cornerback position. That is music to my ears because I might feel differently come week 10 when Ken Sutton returns from suspension. But right now, other than receiver, I think corner is your thinnest position. And I hate to even put this out there, but forbid you had an injury, say, to a George Pickens or a Joey Porter Jr., what is your plan? And I know you could say that about any team to say, well, if you lost one of your star players, Mark, what are you talking about? But there's just not positional depth where it's like, Alex, for me, it's really as simple as this, is if we're playing Madden, this is no knock on any of the guys at receiver or cornerback on the Steelers roster. But if you were playing your buddy in Madden, none of them strike fear in your opponent's hearts. To me, it's as simple as that.
Sure. No, it's a great way to frame that. And even putting injury aside, which is totally a fair point, especially if you lost George Pickens, like what do you do vertically on the outside? You're in big trouble there. But putting that aside, Porter's going to be the number 1 corner for Pittsburgh this year, as he should be. He's going to shadow, in most cases, number 1 receivers. He'll get targeted because of that. But if I'm a team, do I want to throw at Joey Porter or throw away from Joey Porter? I prefer to throw away from Joey Porter, which means Jackson could see a ton of targets this year. So he's got to be battle tested. He's got to step up and be that guy. And he's looked good in camp so far. I think he'll have an okay season. As long as he's no liability, then I can take that. I'm not going to let 4 practices overshadow his entire career. I do think he was better in Carolina last year than people gave him credit for. And he got hurt 2 years ago and was coming off of that. But he's been a nice camp for him. And just have a veteran. It's a really young cornerback room with a ton of changes. No one talks about that. So to have a veteran presence like Jackson, I think is really important.
Are the Steelers going to use Porter as a shadow to the number 1, Alex? And what I mean by that is move him across the field, just because in previous seasons, the last time they really had a corner of this caliber, I would say, was Joe Hayden. And they would just park Joe Hayden on the left side of an offense, reason being most quarterbacks are right-handed. Are they going to move Porter around to shadow an opposing team's number 1?
It looks like it. They did so last year, starting with DeAndre Hopkins in that Titans game. And it's not going to be maybe in every single instance, but certainly big money downs. And in most weeks, I think Porter will. And Hayden was a side corner. And so he might have most often seen the best guy because of the side he played on, but he did not travel more often than not. The last really guy to do that was, you'll talk to him next time, was Ike Taylor. It was like a true shadow, take your number 1, erase him kind of guy. Porter, I think, will have a similar use this year. He's going to give up plays. When you face top receivers consistently, you're going to give up some plays and yards, but he's going to be that guy, and I'm really excited for him to be in that role. I think the ceiling on Porter is so sky high. I think this guy can be a top corner in the NFL. The potential's there. He improved as a tackler last year. His zone defense is better than people think it is, and of course, he can be that real, true man-to-man corner. But yeah, Jackson, can he move too? Because if Porter's moving, the other guy has to move as well. And Jackson is comfortable, I think, playing on both sides, which is also key.
A lot of time now between now and week 1 as well to figure out who's that slot corner, that nickel cornerback too. And that's the beauty of bringing Cam Sutton back in terms of his on-field ability, his ability to play both inside and outside. And this is something I talk with Ike, where the skill sets are just totally different. Usually guys can do one and not the other, but to have someone like Sutton, once he returns from his 8-game suspension, someone who can do both. And the reason I underscore this importance, Alex, is like most teams are going to run three receiver sets, 4 receiver sets, 5 receiver sets. I think that it's like, well, you're in your base 3-4, your base 4-3 defenses, for other teams. And it's like, well, wait a second. That's not how the NFL is played when quarterback's back in a shotgun position. And let's spread it out and get the ball out to the playmakers on the outside.
Yeah, defenses today are so multiple. It's not just here's your base, here's your nickel, maybe here's your dime. I mean, it is a lot of variations, a bunch of different people in different roles. So Sutton can bring slot corner work, outside corner work, dime stuff. He can rotate and become a deep half safety, which is important to allow Minka to have more freedom and unpredictability on some of those third and long situations. So that'll be good whenever he gets back for the Week 10 game against Washington. Slot corner briefly, still up for grabs, but the undrafted rookie corner, Beanie Bishop, has really gotten a ton of first team work. He's done well overall. Need to see more, of course, but I think Pittsburgh is allowing and wants and is giving Beanie Bishop the chance to be that guy. So we'll see how that continues. But right now, Bishop is kind of that front runner to be this team's slot corner until and maybe even after Cam Sutton returns.
All right, inside linebackers as well. I know what to expect from Patrick Queen, but I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina, Alex. I got to see Payton Wilson play last year twice in person for the NC State Wolfpack, and I was at the Notre Dame game he was at where he's going 23 miles per hour plus. To me, it's how that 40 time translates on tape in chasing down ball carriers, and we saw some of that chase down speed where if he can know where to be and where to line up and which holes to fill, what gaps to fill, gap discipline in the run game. And if the defensive lineman in front of him can help eat up blockers and help create that space, if he can stay healthy, I am telling you, this is someone where it's like a lion hunting prey in terms of his ability as a heat-seeking missile to fly to the football. It excites me when you talk about linebackers and Steelers football. A man can dream, Alex Kozora.
And give me a wall to run through, Mark. That's you nailed it. That's fantastic. Yeah. I mean, listen, Wilson is a first round talent who fell to the third round because of the long-term medical concerns, but he's healthy right now. And it wasn't a short-term issue. And it was about, could he get that second contract? We'll worry about second contracts later. Right now in camp, he's been, as you said, as advertised. The time speed and the game speed match up perfectly. This dude is fast. He's so quick to the flat. He's going to be an issue in zone coverage when quarterbacks think a window is there, where maybe a receiver is sitting underneath and they think that they can squeeze the ball in. But with Wilson's closing speed and reaction, he's going to be able to close those windows a lot tighter than other linebackers can. So he's been a hard worker. He's mature. And just quickly, just a very quick tangent. The unique thing about Pittsburgh's draft class this year, because it was the COVID year and record low number of underclassmen, it's a really older, more mature draft class. A bunch of seniors, Fautanu, Wilson, both of Wilsons, Payton and Roman, they're 23, 24 years old. And so they're guys that are probably more NFL ready than previous draft classes. You had more rawness last year, Broderick Jones, Trey Porter Jr., Darnell Washington. So Wilson is a very mature guy. He's going to play. It's not a question to me of if he plays. It's a question of just how much he plays. And I think that's going to start week one. There'll probably be a 3-man rotation at inside linebacker of him, Landon Roberts, and Patrick Queen. So really excited about both those guys, Queen and Wilson. But yeah, Wilson looks legit.
Obviously, the quarterback situation and when Russell Wilson returns to the field is going to be, all eyes on that. We'll see what happens Tuesday when the Steelers put pads on. What else are you looking at when you return to training camp here in this coming week as we get closer and closer to the first preseason game?
I mean, it's everything still, but I think you look at some of the trench play, because honestly, I have not talked about, Fautanu much in this podcast, because when you're not in pads and the things and tackling isn't happening, the sessions aren't live. It's hard to evaluate. I can't give you a real good evaluation on how those guys have done. You don't get the one-on-one O-line, D-line work you'll get when days that they're in pads. And so I really want to watch trench play to evaluate that better, to evaluate the running backs better, some backups, Jonathan Ward, Michael P. Ryan, guys like that. So that's to me where it starts. But I mean, just the overall, who can carry over the good start to camp? We've seen so many guys, they look good without pads. The first couple of practices, they're the camp darling, and they fade off when camp really begins on Tuesday. And can you be able to carry that early success, not only for Tuesday, but throughout all of training camp? That's going to be the question for some of these guys. Can they sustain, or do you fade off? And those stories happen every single year. So that's where we'll begin. And backs on backers too, just on a personal level. I love backs on backers. It's such an intense, fun drill. And so it'll be a really, really fun day on Tuesday.
Yeah. And a week from Friday, first preseason game, August the 9th against the Houston Texans. Alex Kozora, you're the absolute best. If there's anything you need to plug over what you're doing over at Steelers Depot, I always appreciate your time, your insight, and your coverage. Like I said, it is second to none.
Thank you, Mark. I really appreciate that. Yeah, check out the site, SteelersDepot.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. We do a training camp diary each day, full play-by-play, all the notes that we can offer you guys. And so we're big nerds over there at Steelers Depot, but we love it. And I know there's a lot of fans that love it as well. And I know you do as well, Mark. And so check us out and follow our camp coverage.
We will have you on here in the coming weeks. Hopefully, let's try to get right around the start of before the start of the season, maybe just after the start of the season, Alex. Always great catching up with you. He's Alex Kozora. I'm Mark Bergin. This is another edition of the Believe in Steelers show. Go leave us a 5-star review, Apple and Spotify, and on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. See you next time. Again, I'm Mark Bergin. Till then, take care. So long, everybody.